UCLA football is truly missing out by not having a spring game. You look across town, you see the fun. You look at Westwood, you look at Pasadena. What's going on? Let's talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcasts, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe over there. Follow us at Locked On Bruins. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. As I teased in the open, hey, what does it need? You know, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer are all frustrated here. The Bruins, we see all the reports about spring practice and spring camp. But then you see all these other schools, especially that, Trojan horse across town. You've got friends, family, people you know of as dear beloved Bruin fans who are on the other side of the coin. Some might call it the dark side, the evil, whatever it is. And they're going and having fun over there. What's this new exciting product that is known as the spring game, the spring product, everything, some big event that goes on and has their fans buzzing. And of course, USC is going to be buzzing. But with UCLA, how were they generating that buzz? They got the big Dante Moore flip. They got all the recruits in the transfer portal. How can Chip Kelly and UCLA football and UCLA athletics get back to what was, I believe, 8 years ago, a season record high setting in attendance, in season tickets, about 46,000 sold. And now we're coming off a couple of years, partly slowly coming out of the pandemic, especially being in the Los Angeles area. But still, the fans weren't showing up the last couple of seasons, especially last year when UCLA was almost on the verge of having a Pac-12 title contending roster where they work in contention down to the end of the year. So what is UCLA missing? How are they missing out by not having a spring game? It seems obvious. But what are they simply missing out? Well, one of my biggest memories as a longtime UCLA football fan was going to the spring game, right? Trying to get Olsen's autograph, the quarterback way back when. Oh, this is awesome. Go to Drake Stadium. Hey, when the Rose Bowl was being renovated, I remember sitting there next to Anthony Barr and how that influenced me as a fan. And wait a minute, I didn't know Anthony Barr at the time would be epically legendary in UCLA lore. But then all of a sudden he goes and he sacks Barkley, and that's a legendary moment in recent UCLA history. But you get the gist, right? How you're missing these opportunities to connect the young fans, even the kind of flip-flopping fans that even on the YouTube comments say, yeah, I support UCLA basketball, but I like USC football. Like, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to align with UCLA, and that's not really the point here. But the Bruins are missing so much. You can have spring practice. It's open. Yes, that's cool. But how fun is it to go watch a practice unless you're truly covering the team, looking at the nitty-gritty, as opposed to this team could truly have a very competitive spring game. You've got 4 legitimate quarterbacks. You could split them on 2 sides, running backs, receivers, defensive players. You can go returners. You can go here. You can get excellent opportunities to expose what the defense might do under D'Anton Lynn. And the Bruins are sitting here with an epic opportunity. It's maybe not going to generate the fanfare like a USC might, but it should bring the fans out. The Bruins are going to the Big Ten because they were in some financial distress in their athletic department, whether it be having to buy out Mora, whether it was the failed deal of Under Armour, the lack of season tickets being bought, the donations, that number has gone down, right? The big games UCLA has been playing in recent years, how many thousands of tickets have been given away? That LSU game from 2 years ago, nearly 30,000 tickets given away. Before COVID against Oklahoma, so many tickets giving away. As I read this New York Times article, the UCLA attendance has just been awful. We've talked about this, and I've tried to make the reasons, the name brand, the students not being in, the far away, making cases for which way. But with the youth and excitement potentially of this roster, either which way, who wins the job at what position, This is a new era that UCLA should be expanding upon, jumping at the opportunity to go and become a more nationally relevant football program. And some know the name. Of course, Troy Aikman was at practice over the weekend. I think Gary Beeman was over there. You've got all these you've got big names, former Heisman winners, iconic quarterbacks in the broadcasting world, everything. And yet you're sitting here with the products that why aren't we showing up? Well, we love to go to a spring game. Why can't we have it? And of course, there's budgeting and health and practice and all these things. That could be a variety of reasons. And maybe it's the availability of the Rose Bowl or where to host it. But there's so many venues in LA that the Bruins are missing out so much by simply not having an event, to have everybody go out and get signatures. And I know it's a little different in the NIL day and age and everything, but missing out the opportunity to go interact with these players, go and see these quarterbacks play on the field, because we're excited. And quite frankly, it's the first time in quite a few years we don't know who actually is going to start at quarterback. And there might be a dark horse. We expect some all might say Dante Moore. We'd like to see it. We can groan. We can be excited. We can all sit there and grovel and be excited in the stands together as a unified force. Maybe get that televised, get some more eyes on the Bruins. And all of a sudden, when you're going to top 25 rankings later in the year, you're not getting shortchanged when all these teams say UCLA is a joke. It starts with getting an idea and an identity. And at the moment, the identity is quiet, peaceful. We're not going to really stir some feathers. And I think UCLA needs to, hey, we've got some youngsters. We've already stirred the pot by going to the Big Ten. Why are we trying to remain in this little bubble? What's keeping us indoors, hiding our product? And I know there's a variety of reasons, and I'm not going into those right now, but UCLA is truly missing the point. I've got family who was like, we made it a day out of going to the USC spring game, and that hurts my soul, and should hurt your soul. Why is UCLA not capitalizing on this new momentum, the new money, which isn't here yet, but they're missing golden opportunities to grow UCLA fans, right? It's not exactly the Laker-Clipper argument in the NBA, but here you are. UCLA has a chance to go earn more fans, and they play in one of the best venues in all of college football, regardless of how easy or hard it is for students and fans to get in and out of. It's one of the better tailgating atmospheres and the best beautiful football stadiums that has ever been produced, in my simple, humble opinion. And yet here we are, unable to simply put a practice, meaningless football game on to get the fans interested. Why is that? And that's not really the case, but the need going forward is you've got all these schools across the country that are sitting there putting on these meaningless exhibitions that generate so much interest. And in a year where we don't really know what's going to go on, but we're interested in who might start, this would be a perfect, fantastic year for UCLA to put on such an event. And yet you're missing out on the autographs, potentially the fanfare, just camaraderie. You know, you've got your UCLA fans you go tailgate with at the Rose Bowl. Why do you have to wait from November 19th till next September when they play Coastal Carolina? Why couldn't we get this one fun spring Saturday, get us all out when the weather's a little warmer and it's not as rainy as it's been in the winter, and go enjoy a fun day of football? I know in LA it's a little different. There's not as little to do as there is maybe in other places across the country, but you can't tell me that there wouldn't be interest in a spring football game and the Bruins would not benefit from it. That just seems like a missed opportunity, clearly, and we've known this for a little bit since the spring practice schedule was released, but having this ultimate competition would just serve and benefit. And I know you can be like, health, let's not get this guy's hurt, but overall, there's so many guys competing for so many positions. Let's go have some fun and find out what these Bruins are made of in April. And while jobs won't be won till August and September, it's still fun to talk and speculate and simply go out and have a good time and support this Bruins program. I think that's a missed message, especially all the media that's being generated. If you just look, US, it's like, no, UCLA can do this too. Why are we just kicking ourselves in the foot and missing opportunities to grow the fan base, engage the fan base, and get people enjoying or even more so hating, whatever it is, you sit on the side of Chip Kelly and get themselves engaged, because when the Big Ten time comes, that will be a completely different beast. My goodness, we better be ready for that, because that will be an intense shifting of the guard, and I hope we're ready. In the meantime, speaking of the Big Ten, they got a new commissioner, and this is why we should know about what this new commissioner could bring or not, who this guy is. It was recently announced last week with all the basketball news, I didn't touch on him. So let's talk about it after I tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Because you can bet certainly that UCLA is going into a new day and age. That is not that hard to talk about going into the Big Ten. But if you're a big baseball fan, playoffs are here in the NBA. This is a perfect time to get in on the action at America's #1 sportsbook in FanDuel. All you have to do if you're a new customer to go join is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon. If your first bet doesn't win, if you're a new customer, this is the perfect time to get on the action with FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon today. All you can do is make every moment more. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball, and with us at Locked On. Cruising on here in Locked On UCLA, kind of going to cruise to the end of this show. But what's the new news? What's this new idea? Who is coming to lead the Big Ten? And I know it's fun to look at all this stuff that's happening in the Pac-12 or the lack thereof in terms of the media rights deal. UCLA is sitting pretty because the Big Ten is arguably one of the richest conferences out there now with their media rights deal that was negotiated and finished in 2022. So they got a new commissioner. Warren is no longer the head man. It's Tony Petitti, who comes over after years of experience helping begin the BCS and the national championship game, comes over from years of experience as the COO of MLB, helping begin that Field of Dreams game, which was so epically awesome in 2021. And, you can debate how long and entertaining it'll be, considering there won't be one, I believe, this year. But this is a guy who, in Tony Petitti, has had 3 decades of a TV executive. This is a man who's going to think around the box, think outside the box, inside, whatever it is. One of the more recent Power 5 commissioners, I think 4 of the last 5, haven't had all this experience coming in dealing with these college athletic environments. I know he's helped with the BCS and the TV side of things, but how can he help be a leader of the conference? Well, we saw how the Pac-12 fell and crumbled under the commissioner, Larry Scott, going forward. And then George Kliavkoff is trying to be bombastic and loud and bring the Pac-12 back to relevancy. And partially, there's only so much he can do, considering the framework was already broken when Kliavkoff came to take over the Pac-12. And UCLA, just like USC did, assessed the situation and said, hey, well, USC is like, whatever, we're going to the Big Ten. UCLA maybe a little more out of necessity because of budgeting concerns. And you have Martin Germain who's sitting there like, hey, wait a minute here. He's talked about you got to be proactive and not necessarily reactive. And in reaction to this new commissioner, you can see that, hey, there's ways commissioners can crumble the conference. It doesn't even have to deal with the schools. And of course, it didn't help that none of the Pac-12 teams were truly being dominant teams over the last few years. Also, the lack of a West Coast bias, the late games, everybody falling asleep before all the big games happening, right? UCLA, if you're not getting attendance in Los Angeles, what are you doing, right? And yet, here we are with Tony Petitti taking over the Big Ten Conference. And even the CBS Sports article I've been reading, which was put up a few days ago before the weekend, talks about how Tony Petitti is actually the perfect fit to be a Big Ten commissioner. Wasn't initially one of those emerging names that came out as a front-running candidate for the job, but he's a name that I think all of us should begin to know. Take a look at him, go to Google, go into your search bars, whether you're Chat GPT or everything, just kind of look it up and see, hey, who is this guy and why is he important in selling UCLA's future? Because the Pac-12 isn't it. It's Big Ten time. And while I know we have one year left in addition to finishing up the 22 to 23 seasons, I think we got to begin to know, hey, what's going on in the Big Ten? Well, there's been a commissioner shift. Interesting how there's been so many different moves made and they make a change at the top, or the change at the top was made right now. And it seems like Petitti is a brilliant mind that could certainly lead the conference into the next day and age of coast-to-coast conference realignment, right? The Big Ten will go from California all the way to New York, New Jersey, to Maryland, to basically the country's capital, right? And going all the way technically to D.C., not exactly the University of Maryland, but you can get the point. Literally from one coast all the way to the other is what this new conference realignment is going to bring. I know the SEC country is expanding more and more, but the Big Ten is this unique conference that UCLA and SC are joining that we don't know if it's going to work. If it's not, one wonders what Petitti's going to do when it comes to realigning the divisions and who are these constant rivals. I know I talked about months ago or a month ago about Nebraska, Northwestern. Is it going to shift for each sport? Or are we going to have certain conference championships on the West Coast so you can get UCLA, you can get Los Angeles fans out there? Is everything going to be away from Los Angeles? How is the travel going to work in this new thing? And that is what Tony Petitti and what many of the Big Ten organizers and conference leaders will have to decide moving forward. How are they all going to fit into this puzzle? Is it going to crumble before our very eyes? I know there's a traditional sense of saying, well, why can't we make the Pac-12 or the West Coast, the South, the East, the Midwest, and make it all work? That's just not where the world's heading right now. And maybe whether we curve back or not, Tony Petitti is the man leading the future of the Big Ten and UCLA athletics other than Martin Germont. And he is the new commissioner that can help stir the conference and give UCLA even more revenue money and help them build as a more athletic institution than its prestigious academic reputation it's got right now, beyond what it's already had in past successes as we look forward to the future. Enough rambling and discussing about the Big Ten. I guess I'm on a bit of a rant today, but we're going to end the show here on Locked On UCLA, cruising to segment 3 about UCLA baseball. Nothing too dramatic, but a bit of a stumbling, not so good week in my mind when it talks about John Savage's ball club, because this is a team who sits squarely in third in the Pac-12 standings, 21-10-1 overall, 8-5-1 in Pac-12 play. They sit in third behind Arizona State, who's come on strong resurgently. They've got Stanford, who they're just behind. And for UCLA, when it comes to their schedule, they still have to play the likes of ASU. They go to ASU to end the year. They still have to play Stanford in a couple weeks. And hey, for a while there, it looked like USC might not run away, but take the Pac-12 championship in the regular season. They've stumbled since a little bit after beating Stanford earlier in the Pac-12 year. But the Bruins have some tough games coming up. I believe 8 to 9 road games in a row after they had a cupcake schedule over these last few weeks. They had a series at Washington State. While Washington State does have quite a few wins, they were struggling heading into that UCLA series. The Bruins get swept. UCLA comes home and plays a road game at Long Beach, wins there, but they had to struggle and scrap to beat Utah, and they had a tie with the curfew. But losing the midweek to Pepperdine and only winning 2 out of 3 against Davis, a 2-2 week, not the best against teams who are not that good, Pepperdine and Davis. And I know maybe the intensity isn't necessarily there when you're not in Pac-12 play, those late mid-April, maybe early May or mid-May non-conference series, because the Pac-12 only has 11 baseball teams and how some conferences have unequal members. So you get those non-conference matchups at certain point during the conference buys. It's just frustrating to see UCLA, who initially jumped at the RPI, but they've had some struggles atop the rotation. They've dealt with the injury and, in and out of the lineup of Kyle Karros with, I believe, an ankle injury and everything in between. But in what is now the sprint to the finish, UCLA has to turn it on because they're going to face an underrated UC Irvine team at home on Tuesday to end their homestand. And then you go on the road at SC, at LMU, at Stanford, at Irvine. And those are all very tough games from start to finish. When you're playing your bitter rival on the road in a crucial conference series, UCLA can go from an outside chance at a 1 or a 2 seed in the Pac-12 tournament, or you can slide to the middle of the pack and have to climb out to get through that tournament in Scottsdale. And then, all right, well, you might get Cal. You still have to play Oregon State. Arizona State is one of those tougher teams that surged up the standings. That's who you end the regular season against. And then all of a sudden, it's Pac-12 tournament play, an NCAA tournament play. So that's where the frustrations lie for me, that in a sequence of weekends and midweek games, which seem destined, and in my mind, designed for UCLA to be successful, they didn't truly run away with it. And I know each team gets hot at different times. And while it's not always been the number one team in the country that wins the NCAA tournament in baseball, it's a little different than it is on the softball side. At the moment, the Bruins have been a little frustrating for a team that is largely taking care of business at home, 17-3-1. I just had banked on the Brooms coming out against Davis on that Sunday. You win against Pepperdine, a team that in my mind isn't all too good. They got some tough sticks at the top of the lineup, but their record and everything in between. And, in baseball, things happen. You do lose to these teams, and midweeks can always be a sham of luck or bad luck. And sometimes a Sunday start when you've won the series isn't always as motivating. But for a team that wants to compete and go deep in this tournament, they just haven't played like it at this very moment. And now I'm not going into full detail. I want to get Max's thoughts because he's going to come up again and join the podcast. But that's why you should stay tuned, right? Listen to this podcast every day, and we give little tidbits. Max is going to talk about softball coming up. We'll talk more UCLA basketball in addition to more recruiting news, more UCLA football spring practice stuff, everything in between, which is why you need to become an everyday listener of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Go check out old episodes, see dumb takes, fun things, everything in between, because Max will join us again throughout the next couple of days. I'll be here telling you all the ins and outs, and if there's any breaking news, if somebody decides to come back, if the Bruins get a new recruit, a Mata, or if there's a new transfer portal guy coming through the market, all those things will be talked about on the Locked On UCLA podcast. So stay excited, stay tuned in to all the latest content, and join us here on the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer saying so long. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Download and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. And put your hands up, UCLA fans. End of show 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fights. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.